Let's go to the Reshevsky game. This was Blindfold. Samuel Reshevsky playing 10 players simultaneously, not looking at any of the boards. Samuel Herman Reshevsky, born November 26, 1911, passed away April 4th, 1992, a Polish chess prodigy, but came to the United States and became a leading U.S. chess grandmaster. He was a contender for the World Chess Championship all the way from the mid-30s all the way to the mid-60s. He tied for third place in the 1948 World Chess Championship tournament. He tied for second place in the 1953 Candidates Tournament. Reshevsky was an 8-time winner of the U.S. Chess Championship, tying him with Bobby Fischer, who had 8 all-time U.S. Chess Championship titles. Reshevsky was an accountant by profession, but did write some chess literature. He begins the game with the English opening, and Bobby responds with the Anglo-Indian defense, knight to f6. Knight c3 is the queen's knight variation, g6, knight f3, and bishop g7. And as soon as d4 is played, we transpose to the normal variation of the king's Indian defense. Black castles his king, pawn e4, pawn d6, bishop e2. Bishop e2 is the orthodox variation. Pawn c6. You've seen me play this as black on quite a few occasions, usually by transposition because I prefer the old Indian defense, but I often transpose into a king's Indian. White castles, pawn to a6. And that's going to relieve the c-man of any defensive responsibilities on this square. It also prepares b5, but it also enables the pawn to c5 at some juncture after the queen's knight comes to d7. So there's quite a bit of flexibility in this quiet little pawn a6 move. Reshevsky played rook e1 right here. More common is pawn h3, followed by, as I mentioned, the theme of pawn b5, e5, knight e8, bishop f4, and knight d7 is the most common continuation. Reshevsky rather playing rook to e1. Pawn b5, yeah, the bot calling for bishop g4. I frequently play knight b d7 in this position. I have played bishop g4 in this position, but more commonly I play knight b d7. I find this to be superior with the idea of either e5 or c5 again. I get a star here. b5 by Bobby Fischer, b3. And yeah, that's unexpected, b3. The bot calling for queen c2, but I think the better move is e5 here. It causes black a little bit more trouble. I get an oh, it changed its mind. Why does the bot do that? It'll start by telling me I'm inaccurate, but then it gives me a star. And anyway, after pawn takes pawn is one way, or you can knight takes pawn is the other way. And bishop e6 here can be played. You don't need to worry about the fact that the e-man is blockaded since your dark-squared bishop is fianchettoed. Okay, and that gets a star. Anyway, b3 by Reshevsky, b4 hitting the knight, e5 counterattacking. That gets a star. It gets a star. I thought knight a4 was going to be played. That also gets a star. This move, this e5 counterattack, is definitely more exciting than knight a4. Pawn takes the pawn. Note that if black plays pawn takes the knight, then pawn takes the knight. Let's play that out. That's a mistake because after pawn takes the knight and then bishop takes the pawn, well, I would suppose bishop g5 is at least equal. Oh, I get an exclam for this. We'll give it an equal sign. Going back. Bobby with pawn takes the pawn on e5, and pawn takes the pawn, renewing the threat. Now the pawn did take the knight, and pawn takes the knight here. The bot says trade queens first. So I'm assuming that Bobby should therefore trade queens here, but he played bishop takes the pawn. Yep, same thing. Inaccurate, and the bot calling for queen takes queen. When I said I assume, because to me, well, I only figured that out because the bot said queen takes queen here. But to me, to be honest, I don't know why you'd give up control of the open file and give black sole possession of the open file, or vice versa. I'm not sure why you would give white full control of the open file. The bot says that's a mistake. Keep it there because he's already on an open file and discover an attack on the E-man. Okay, really interesting, a little bit complex. I won't pretend to understand the computer there. Bishop h6 hitting the rook. It's just remarkable to know that Reshevsky is playing 10 games without looking at any of them right here. But the bot calling for bishop g5. I did think bishop g5 was not only the best move, but the most thematic. And now queen takes queen is played. Of course, I would have played rook e8. For once, the bot agrees with me. Queen's rook takes the queen. Queen's rook takes the queen. Now he's got two rooks bearing down these open files. So actually looks real good for white. Now rook e8, bishop d3. Yeah, I prefer knight g5 there. I had it in my notes. Bobby with knight d7. That counts as a miss. The bot calling for pawn a5. I liked the idea of a rook lift and slide. Gives you, I'm inaccurate. Oh, it changed its mind again, giving me a check mark. Fickle bot. Okay, knight d7 was played. Bishop e4. Knight c5, offering the fork. The bot calling for an undevelopment. That's interesting. You just put your knight on d7. The bot says, just put it back and defend that pawn. That is a move that's hard for a human to play, especially since he only just played knight d7. Psychologically, it's hard to undo the mistake that you just made. Well, obviously, knight c5 allows the fork, and Reshevsky plays the fork. Bishop f5, and would you take the e rook or the a rook? Doesn't much matter. Take either rook. You know, bishop takes e8, rook takes e8, and knight d4. Or bishop takes a8, rook takes a8, knight d4. Either or. Reshevsky didn't play either of those moves. I'm confused by pawn g4. I am awfully confused by that. And the bot says, don't take either rook. Since you don't have to take either rook, make black decide which rook you're going to take. And don't take either rook until he moves one of the rooks. That's a good principle. I don't know what Reshevsky's going after here. My move was, let's see what I get. I get an inaccuracy. Take the other rook. This was my line. I knew it had to be one or the other. I guess because this decoys the Now it says, no, you dummy, take the E-rook. Fickle bot. Oh, fickle bot, you cracked me up. Anyway, G4, I don't understand G4. I don't understand this giveaway here. I don't. King G2, bishop back to F5. Now bishop takes the A8 rook. Rook takes the bishop, and knight D4, as in the line that I showed. Knight d3 hitting the rook. That gets a question mark. Knight takes the bishop. Knight takes the rook. Check. Rook takes the knight. And pawn takes the knight. This does not look bad at all for white. The king is contained. It's going to be hard to liberate that king. You got to make a lot of moves. The one thing that black has going for him is this passed pawn, doesn't he? But with rook and bishop against rook and bishop, this should be drawn. So what mistake does Reshevsky make to let this slip? Or was this, let me see. No, this was a win for Fischer. He goes rook d1. That's reasonable. Bot not liking it, but I have no issue with it. e5, c5. I mean, now that you've blocked your bishop here, I might play rook c1 here. It says I'm inaccurate. c5 was played. Rook c8. And the threat of c2 is always looming. b4 defends the c-man. f4. He's trying to trap this bishop. I might have played rook c4, c6 first if I were in black's shoes. No, says that's inaccurate. I was doing so well, and now I've had several inaccuracies in a row. f4, king f3, with the idea of king e4. Yeah, rook g1 lining up with the king would definitely be an interesting move. Play rook g1 first. Mark it as interesting. King f3 was played, and the eval bar giving Reshevsky the advantage here. Bishop e7, scoring a blunder. Now, I was really wanting c2 here myself. I get an exclam for this. You can give a check, force me to h8. Well, yeah, then you can play king e4, and you should be okay. Or king e2. Bishop e7, king e4. Well, here rook g1 is just winning now, isn't it? He played king e4. Oh, and the eval bar lunged back to center. Yeah, give the check here. Force king to h8, and then you have the that forces the king back, and right, that's just that. You're losing your passed pawn. And this should be insurmountable now. Well, he didn't see it. Of course, he was blindfolded, so he didn't see any of it. King e4. Now rook c6, rook g1 check, but rook g6. A move too late on rook g1. Rook takes the rook, f takes the rook, and now king d3 coming after this passer. It's a forced move. If you take the free pawn, you just lose the game. Yeah, I can't do that yet. I have to play g5 first. Yeah, play that first, because if he takes, he covers the promotion square. But c2 on the next move, and then you promote with this interference. So anyway, king d3, king f7, king takes pawn, g5. The bot calling for bishop h4. I thought he should just continue with his king. I get a check mark. g5. And I guess he's trying to trap this bishop, but this passer is going to prohibit the trapping of the bishop, I think, because you need this bishop to control this square in order to trap this bishop, but this bishop will have to babysit this pawn. Reshevsky played c6 here to make that point, but once again, the eval bar goes back to center. He should have played king d3 here. And that gets an exclam. Yeah, interesting. More hopeful is that move. If I play g4, then just king e4 holds everything together. c6, king e6, getting into the square of the pawn. King c4, king d6, pawn b5, c7 is the way to keep it equal. And the point here, this is, oh boy, that's quite a move. c7 decoys the king away from d5, allowing king d5. And that will hold the game together. So yeah, definitely have to play exact, and b5 is not the way to do it. So pawn takes pawn check, king takes pawn, and now e4 is going to be problematic. e3 cannot be allowed or the game will be over. Well, I mean, you've got to get your bishop up in here so it can cover the promotion square. And for that reason, king c4 is got to be the wrong way to go. It is. You have to play here, and after here, bishop d4 to x-ray defend, so that if here, then and only then, bishop c3. But the bot says this is still winning for black, so it may not matter now at this juncture. It's too late. He's losing either way. Okay, king c4, bishop f6, much stronger than king takes pawn. That gets an exclam. Because king takes pawn is answered by king d4, and look at the eval bar go back to center. And now e3 can just be traded off. Even if you go here, it becomes irrelevant because I can stay in the square of the pawn, and that pawn is stopped. So bishop f6 gets the exclam. Pawn h4 here. What? Really? Am I reading that right? I did not expect pawn h4. It gets a star. Gets a star, but the eval bar lunges up in black's favor. Wow. Well, I guess the point is he's hoping for a capture here. That would not be the right move. Bobby played the right move, which is f3. Getting an exclam. Yeah, if pawn takes pawn, the eval bar goes back to center. I see. And the point is, after c7, king takes c7, bishop takes f4, then king c6, pawn a4. The king has to stop here. This bishop is going to blockade that. This pawn's going to stop that. These pawns are irrelevant. And the promotion square is the wrong color square. And that's why that would be a draw. And same thing, don't capture this pawn with king takes c6, because now bishop takes the g-man, and that will draw. So f3 gets the exclam because it just keeps the advantage firmly in black's grasp. So h takes the g-man here. Yeah, bishop f8's probably his last ditch, but probably loses anyway. This move hopes for bishop e7, which is wrong, because you can see there, after takes, then we've got the king coming over, and these pawns get stopped. Now you could play g4. Nope, the eval bar says it doesn't even work, Danny. Yeah, because of g4. It only works if he takes the pawn. Yeah, I overlooked that. If you take the pawn, you've lost. King takes, everybody stopped, and this king can't stop everybody. Okay. Back. So anyway, f3, h takes g5, and now pawn e3 gets a double exclam. Bobby Fischer. Wow. Yeah, that will do it. You can stop one, but not both of these pawns. If pawn takes pawn, this pawn pushes. If you bring your king up, I pawn takes pawn and outrun your king. Here, white tried a check, but now bishop e7, check, takes, c7. King d7 stops the pawn from promoting, and the great Sammy Reshevsky resigned the game because you cannot stop both of these pawns. If here, then here, and if here, then here, and promotion comes on the next. Quite a game. Kudos to Reshevsky for a 10-board simultaneous exhibition, blindfolded.